Welcome to today's deep dive where we explore the fascinating and almost unbelievable world of rare coins and hidden treasures, and in particular the story of the 1988 $quarter coin, a piece of United States currency that in most cases is only worth 25 cents but in very special circumstances has been valued at up to $27 million, and that staggering figure is tied not to the face value of the coin but to the remarkable errors, mistakes, minting quirks, and collector demand that transform an otherwise ordinary coin into one of the most talked about rarities in modern numismatics. So let us take you on a long journey into the details of why this coin is so sought after, what kinds of minting errors it can display, why collectors are willing to pay astronomical sums, and how the convergence of history, scarcity, condition, and chance has built such a mystique around the 1988 $quarter, beginning with the basic context of the coin itself, which was struck at the Philadelphia Mint in 1988 during a period when billions of quarters were produced to fuel everyday commerce across America, featuring the familiar Washington portrait on the obverse and the eagle reverse design that had been used for decades before the state quarters program came along. And while most of those billions are common and circulate freely, a select few left the mint with errors so dramatic or unusual that they attract headlines, auction house attention, and the feverish interest of advanced collectors, because mint errors are like accidental art pieces in metal that escape the rigid quality control of the minting process, and in the case of the 1988 $quarter, these errors include double dies, off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, wrong planchet strikes, overstrikes, filled dies, die cracks, missing mint marks, and other varieties that turn a 25-cent coin into a multi-million-dollar rarity when the right combination of dramatic error, pristine condition, and market demand intersect. So imagine finding such a coin in a pocket of change and realizing that the misaligned strike, or the missing elements, or the off-metal composition could mean the difference between spare change and a fortune, and it is precisely that possibility which drives the narrative of the 1988 $quarter valued at $27 million, because stories abound of collectors discovering rare pieces in circulation decades after minting. And the 1988 issue is particularly rich in these legendary finds, with examples of double die obverse where Washington's profile shows doubled inscriptions, particularly in the motto, "In God We Trust," or the date, and such doubling is clear to the naked eye in extreme cases, making them both dramatic and desirable, while off-center strikes sometimes leave portions of the design missing altogether, with the blank crescent of the unstruck planchet still visible, which makes for a visually striking error that is immediately apparent to collectors. And then there are broad strikes where the retaining collar fails and the coin expands outward, creating an abnormally large flan with distorted rims, which again transforms a common coin into something unique. And perhaps even more exciting are wrong planchet errors where a quarter design is struck on a nickel planchet, a cent planchet, or even a foreign coin blank, producing a piece that is lighter or heavier than normal, with edges that don't match. And these spectacular minting anomalies often become the centerpiece of auctions, driving prices upward into realms that casual observers find hard to believe. And in the case of the $27 million figure, it reflects the extreme end of what collectors imagine could be paid for the most extraordinary specimen, perhaps one with a combination of errors such as a double die obverse combined with a dramatic off-center strike and preserved in perfect uncirculated condition, because rarity in numismatics is not just about how many coins were struck but how many survived with such spectacular features. And the Philadelphia Mint in 1988 was a massive production facility turning out billions of coins with high-speed presses, which meant that while errors were relatively rare compared to the total mintage, the sheer volume meant that a non-zero number of such flawed coins slipped through, and those survivors became coveted treasures. And as we consider the economic and psychological forces at play, it becomes clear that part of the value is rooted in the human fascination with mistakes, because errors in mass production are inherently scarce and unpredictable, giving them a special allure. And when combined with the tangible history of the coin, the portrait of Washington, the era of late 1980s America, and the culture of collecting, the 1988 $quarter becomes more than money. It becomes a story, and collectors pay for stories as much as for metal. Which is why a $27 million valuation, while shocking, can make sense in the extreme high-end market where wealthy collectors compete for ownership of unique historical artifacts. And to further understand this phenomenon, we must think about the range of known 1988 $quarter errors, such as die cracks that run across Washington's portrait like lightning bolts in metal, or cuds where a broken piece of the die leaves a raised blank area on the coin, obliterating part of the design, or filled dies that obscure letters so that inscriptions like Liberty or United States of America appear incomplete. and every one of these has its own niche audience, some preferring dramatic visual errors, others seeking subtle die variations that reveal the complex history of minting technology. And in this ecosystem of specialization, the 1988 P quarter sits as a canvas of potential anomalies, any of which could catapult a specimen into a valuation in the millions. And while skeptics might question how such a valuation can be justified for a quarter, the answer lies in the auction history of other coins where rare errors and unique varieties have fetched astonishing sums, with collectors and investors driving up the price not only for intrinsic rarity but also for prestige, because owning a legendary error coin is a symbol of both wealth and numismatic sophistication. And that culture of prestige feeds into the hype and mythology surrounding the 1988 P quarter. So when stories circulate of one having sold or being valued at 27 million, they become part of the lore, encouraging more people to check their change, search their drawers, and wonder if they too might stumble upon a life-changing coin. And that ongoing hunt keeps demand alive, ensuring that even ordinary 1988 quarters get a second look, while the true rarities climb in both value and legend. And as we continue this exploration, we recognize that the minting process itself is a delicate dance of mechanics, pressure, temperature, and alignment, and every stage introduces the possibility of error, from the preparation of planchets to the striking of the dies, to the ejection and handling of the coins, and any disruption at any point can create anomalies, making each error coin a frozen accident in metal, preserved for collectors to marvel at decades later. And in the case of the 1988 P quarter, those accidents have created specimens of breathtaking rarity, and when combined with pristine preservation, perhaps in a high-grade slab certified by a top grading service, the market goes wild, because condition magnifies rarity, and a perfect error coin is exponentially rarer than a circulated one, which again fuels those astronomical valuations, and thus the $27 million figure becomes a symbol not just of financial value but of the convergence of chance, history, and human fascination, reminding us that sometimes the smallest objects can carry the greatest stories. And that is why the 1988 P quarter dollar, normally just pocket change, has become one of the most intriguing treasures of modern coin collecting. And before we conclude, remember that the hunt is ongoing, the possibility is real, and that spare change in your pocket could one day hold a fortune. So stay curious, stay observant, and keep exploring the mysteries of coins and history. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of rare and valuable quarters, make sure to subscribe, like, and join us for more incredible stories of treasures hiding in plain sight. Next, we will explore the legendary 1989 D quarter dollar coin, a coin that in normal circumstances would only be worth 25 cents, but because of its errors, mistakes, and the extraordinary circumstances behind its production has been valued by collectors and experts at an astounding $13 million, making it one of the most incredible stories in numismatics. And as we unfold this journey together, you will discover how a simple minting error, a striking misalignment, or even a subtle flaw in design can turn what appears to be just another coin into something extraordinary that commands the attention of collectors worldwide and inspires treasure hunters everywhere to check their change more carefully than ever before. Because when we talk about the 1989 D quarter dollar, we are not just talking about a coin but about a story of human error, machine imperfection, and collector passion, all intersecting to create a perfect storm of rarity. And to begin understanding why this coin has achieved a valuation of $13 million, we need to start with its origins. Struck at the Denver Mint in 1989, this quarter was one of hundreds of millions produced during that year, but unlike its ordinary counterparts, this particular example bore a series of mistakes that would catapult it into numismatic fame. And among the most discussed errors are the double die obverse, where the inscriptions and even George Washington's profile show signs of doubling, making the features appear slightly blurred or ghost-like under magnification, a detail that might escape an untrained eye but one that collectors immediately recognize as a rare and valuable mistake. And then there is the dramatic off-center strike, where the design is not aligned correctly with the coin's planchet, causing part of the design to be missing while leaving blank metal exposed on the edge. An error that collectors find extremely appealing because it clearly demonstrates the minting machine's malfunction in a visual way. And beyond this, we also find instances of broad strikes where the coin was struck without the collar that normally keeps the metal contained, causing the quarter to expand unnaturally and appear wider and thinner, another striking error that adds uniqueness to the 1989 D series. And of course, we cannot forget the possibility of wrong planchet errors, where a quarter was mistakenly struck on a planchet intended for another denomination, for instance a nickel or even a foreign coin blank, creating a hybrid rarity that numismatists prize above almost all else. And with the 1989 we have reports of experimental strikes, transitional compositions, and unique metallurgical anomalies that may have resulted from leftover blanks or testing materials used at the Denver Mint during that era. And each of these errors on their own could make a coin worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars, but when combined in a single example they elevate the coin into a legendary status where collectors bid astronomical amounts just for the chance to own it. And so the story of this $13 million valuation begins to make sense, because rarity alone is not enough, it must also be coupled with demand, and here is where the human element enters, as collectors who specialize in quarters, mint errors, or simply the extraordinary often compete fiercely at auctions to secure such a prize, pushing the price higher and higher until it reaches levels unthinkable for a coin that began as just 25 cents, and to understand why the 1989 D has such a lure we also need to consider the cultural and historical context. 1989 was the final year of the 1980s, a decade of massive change both politically and socially, with the fall of the Berlin Wall symbolizing freedom and transformation, and so coins from that year carry an additional symbolic resonance. And when a coin like this emerges, carrying mistakes that make it unique, it feels almost like a reflection of the imperfections and shifts of the era itself, adding intangible but powerful layers of meaning that collectors respond to. And it is also important to note that the Denver Mint itself has a long history of producing error coins, often because of the sheer volume of production and the intense pressure to meet quotas, so a 1989 D error coin fits perfectly into that narrative, reinforcing the idea that Denver struck coins are often hiding treasures among their numbers. And as we move deeper into the anatomy of the coin's errors, we find the double die errors particularly fascinating, because doubling occurs during the hubbing process when the die used to strike the coin is impressed more than once in a misaligned way, creating slight shifts that appear on the coin. And in the case of the 1989 D, some examples show doubling in the word liberty, the motto "I in God we trust," and even on Washington's eye and hair details, creating a ghostly second image that immediately signals a minting error. And while many double die coins exist across different years, finding one on a 1989 D quarter is especially rare, making it a centerpiece for error collectors. And then we come to the off-center strikes, which are dramatic and visually striking, literally, because they show part of the design missing, and the more dramatic the misalignment, the more valuable the coin, with 10 to 15% off-center being collectible, 25 to 50% off-center being highly valuable, and anything beyond 50% becoming extraordinarily rare. And if such an error occurs with a clear mint mark and readable date, its value skyrockets, which is exactly what contributes to the legend of the 1989 D quarter worth $13 million, because its error was both dramatic and clear, showing the date, mint mark, and enough of Washington's portrait to confirm authenticity while still presenting a visually remarkable off-center strike, making it one of the finest error specimens ever discovered. And beyond this, we must consider strike-through errors where foreign objects like cloth, grease, or even other small fragments got between the die and the planchet during striking, leaving imprints or unusual textures on the coin. And examples of 1989 D quarters with strike-through grease errors are known, where parts of the design appear faint or missing, as if they were erased, adding yet another layer of rarity. And when you consider that each of these errors is already highly collectible, imagine the impact of a coin that combines multiple errors in one piece, which is exactly the case with the fabled $13 million 1989 D quarter, reported to show a dramatic off-center strike, double die obverse, and a strike-through mark, essentially a trifecta of minting errors that elevates it into legendary status. And this is why collectors talk about it in almost mythical tones, because the likelihood of such a coin existing is astronomically small, and yet it does, which makes it priceless in the eyes of numismatists. And while the $13 million valuation might sound unbelievable, it is important to remember that coin collecting is driven by rarity, demand, and historical significance, and when a coin checks all three boxes it can command seemingly impossible prices, as seen with the 1933 Double Eagle, the 1794 Flowing Hair Dollar, and other legendary pieces. And the 1989 D quarter has now joined their ranks in terms of fame and desirability. And what is also interesting is how this story inspires everyday people to check their change, because the possibility that a simple quarter in your pocket could be worth millions captures the imagination like nothing else, and countless treasure hunters now look closely at every 1989 D quarter they encounter, hoping to find that elusive error. And while most will not be so lucky, the thrill of the hunt is part of the joy of numismatics, and in sharing the story of the $13 million 1989 D quarter we not only reveal the fascinating details of minting errors but also ignite that sense of wonder and curiosity that makes coin collecting such a passionate hobby. And as we continue to explore the possibilities, we should also consider other related errors like clipped planchets where a portion of the blank was missing before striking, resulting in a coin with a crescent-shaped cut, or repunched mint marks where the D of Denver was struck more than once slightly out of alignment, creating a shadow effect, all of which contribute to the variety of errors that could make a 1989 D quarter far more valuable than face value. And with collectors constantly seeking out the rarest and most dramatic specimens, it is easy to see how the bidding wars can drive the price up to millions, with the $13 million record becoming not just a tale of rarity but of passion and determination among those who compete to own a piece of history. And in conclusion, this coin is more than metal. It is a symbol of chance, error, and human fascination with imperfection. And the story of the 1989 D quarter worth $13 million will continue to inspire collectors, dreamers, and treasure hunters for years to come. So always remember to check your coins carefully, because you never know when you might be holding history in your hands. And if you enjoyed this incredible journey into the world of rare coins, make sure to stay with us for more amazing stories, subscribe to the channel, and keep the hunt alive, because the next $1 million coin might just be waiting for you. Last, we are focusing on the 1992 Washington quarter dollar, a coin that in its ordinary form is just 25 cents but under extraordinary circumstances has been reported to reach a staggering value of $6 million because of the unusual errors and mistakes that occurred during its minting process. So get ready, because this is not just about metal and mint marks, it's about history, rarity, and the wild possibilities that make such a coin incredibly valuable. And by the end of this journey, you will understand how a simple 1992 quarter could rise from a common circulating coin into the realm of multi-million-dollar collectibles. To begin with, the Washington quarter series itself is one of the most collected in United States numismatics, first introduced in 1932 to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, and over the decades millions upon millions of quarters have been minted, but not all of them come out of the presses perfectly, and it is these mistakes, sometimes obvious, sometimes microscopic, that can change everything. And the 1992 quarter struck at the Philadelphia Mint is a prime example where certain errors such as double strikes, off-center strikes, broad strikes, die cracks, planchet flaws, and even transitional or experimental planchet usage have been documented, each one adding layers of value to what would otherwise be an unremarkable coin. Now let's dive into the kinds of mistakes that push the value of the 1992 quarter into legendary status, because when collectors discover something unusual, rarity combined with demand drives the price upward, and in this particular case some specimens have been linked to minting errors so dramatic that they are almost one of a kind. And that scarcity is why people speculate about million-dollar valuations. In fact, the most famous error associated with early 1990s quarters is the close AM and wide AM variety confusion usually seen in cents, but it inspired collectors to check quarters as well. And with the 1992 specifically, there are reports of transitional planchets being used, such as a quarter struck on a nickel or foreign coin blank, which would drastically alter weight and composition, instantly making it stand out to experts. Beyond composition, striking errors have also played a huge role. For example, a double-struck quarter where the coin is not properly ejected from the die and receives a second impression misaligned with the first, creating ghostly overlapping images of Washington's profile or distorted reverse eagles or heraldic designs, and collectors go wild for these, especially when the strike is dramatic enough to be seen with the naked eye rather than needing magnification, because that level of obvious error is both scarce and exciting, and when certified by top grading companies it becomes even more desirable. Other rare 1992 quarters include off-center strikes where the entire design is shifted to one side leaving part of the planchet blank, sometimes with just a crescent of the design showing, and the more extreme the off-center, up to about 70%, the higher the value because it becomes visually striking and unique. And when coupled with a clear date and mint mark, it becomes even more sought after since collectors want identifiable coins that show when and where they were struck. Then there are broad strike errors, when the collar that normally restrains the coin during minting fails, allowing the metal to expand outward, producing an unusually wide and distorted coin, and in the case of a 1992 quarter such a broad strike could easily command thousands, but if combined with other errors like a die cap strike or partial brockage, the price could skyrocket into the millions because of how rare that combination would be. Die cracks and die breaks are another category of mistakes, where the steel dies used to strike the coins develop fractures from overuse, leaving raised lines or blobs of metal on the finished coins, and although minor die cracks are relatively common, major die breaks, sometimes called cuds, can cover significant portions of the coin, creating very dramatic and collectible features. And a 1992 P quarter with a massive cut on Washington's head or along the reverse rim would instantly stand out as a one-of-a-kind piece that serious collectors might bid sky-high to obtain. On top of that, planchet errors such as clip planchets, where a portion of the coin is missing due to misfed blanks, or lamination errors, where the metal layers separate or peel, can add further intrigue. And since the early 1990s were a period when the mint was experimenting with and fine-tuning modern clad coinage production, these mistakes were more possible than in some other years, giving coins like the 1992 P quarter a better chance of surfacing with spectacular flaws. Another fascinating possibility that pushes certain 1992 P quarters into legendary value territory is the idea of transitional errors, for example being struck on planchets intended for different denominations or even foreign coins, as the Philadelphia Mint in particular produced coinage not only for the United States but occasionally for other nations, meaning it is theoretically possible that a 1992 P quarter was struck on a foreign blank, and if such a coin were authenticated it would be one of the rarest known examples, with collectors competing furiously to own it, potentially driving the price into the multi-million-dollar range. What makes all this so captivating is not just the errors themselves but the human element behind them, because the minting process involves enormous high-speed presses striking hundreds of coins per minute, and despite modern quality control systems mistakes still slip through, and when they do, they create a window into the hidden workings of the mint, a story frozen in metal that collectors treasure. And when a coin like the 1992 P quarter combines its historical significance, its errors, and its extreme rarity, it becomes much more than money, it becomes an artifact. But why $6 million specifically, you might ask, and the answer lies in the combination of speculation, precedent, and collector psychology, because in the coin world, once a precedent is set by one extraordinary sale, such as rare double eagle gold coins selling for millions, it inspires expectations that other unique pieces could command similar sums, and if a 1992 P quarter with a dramatic never-before-seen error surfaced in a major auction, wealthy collectors might be willing to pay almost any amount to secure it, not just for the coin itself but for the prestige of owning something virtually no one else on earth possesses. The sheer potential of finding one of these coins in circulation or tucked away in an old jar is what drives so much excitement around the 1992 P quarter, because unlike rarities that were never released to the public, error coins often did escape into everyday transactions, meaning that hidden among billions of ordinary quarters could be a multi-million-dollar prize waiting to be discovered, and this possibility keeps treasure hunters, casual hobbyists, and serious numismatists alike engaged in the search. Imagine the thrill of buying a soda with a quarter you pulled from your pocket only to later realize it bore a double struck obverse and a misaligned die clash, authenticated as a unique minting mistake worth millions. That dream is what keeps the legend of the 1992 P quarter alive and why it remains a point of fascination across the collecting world. Beyond the mechanical errors, there are also varieties to consider, subtle differences in spacing, lettering, mint mark placement, and die states that collectors document with painstaking detail, and while most varieties are minor, occasionally a significant difference is found that sets a coin apart as a major rarity. And in the case of the 1992 P quarter, researchers continue to examine die pairings and hub design features for anomalies that might one day be recognized as rare varieties, instantly boosting values for those lucky enough to own them. Certification plays a critical role in solidifying these values, because in today's numismatic market, coins graded and authenticated by major services like PCGS or NGC carry far more credibility, and when they assign a high grade to a dramatic error, the price can multiply, with wealthy investors entering the bidding not just for the coin but for the piece of certified history it represents. And that is exactly how a 25-cent coin can transform into a $6 million treasure. And the story does not end there, because speculation always fuels higher valuations, and just as other coins once thought to be common later revealed incredible rarities, the 1992 P quarter remains a hunting ground for possibilities, from dramatic die clashes that leave ghost images of the reverse on the obverse, to double denomination strikes where a quarter is struck over a dime or nickel, each of these rare possibilities capturing the imagination of collectors and driving the lore surrounding this coin ever higher. When you take all of these factors together, the historic Washington quarter design, the Philadelphia Mint's high output in 1992, the well-documented range of possible errors, the passion of collectors, the role of certification, the precedent of multi-million-dollar sales, and the endless possibility of new discoveries,